Welcome, everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes to get started for those who are still in the middle of connecting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. Before we dive into the topic today, I have a few reminders. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the IM window. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. We've had a large number of people register for this webinar. We're thrilled to see such interest, but it means we may not be able to answer every question in real time. We will do our best to get to as many as we can, and we have several dedicated people standing by just to answer your questions. But I wanted to provide an additional mechanism to ensure everyone's questions get answered. If you'll visit aka.ms MCAS Q&A, you'll see a post dedicated to webinar questions. We'll be reviewing the question transcript after this webinar and we'll post further answers there. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place for you to ask a question. So feel free to reply on that post with any questions you have. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/MCAS recordings. While you're there, please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, requesting features, giving feedback, reviewing our product roadmaps, attending in-person events, or joining webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So please join us. We have a great topic today. This is part 2 of a 6-part webinar series on Microsoft Cloud App Security, or MCAS for short. Throughout the series, we'll be walking through all the major pillars of functionality, showing you how to deploy and configure each part. Today's focus will be on leveraging state-of-the-art threat detection capabilities to quickly detect and remediate threats across your cloud apps. Our presenter and MCAS expert is Banu Jafarli. She's a program manager on our MCAS team and part of our Get to Production group. The focus of her role is to help deploy our customers and help them configure MCAS, so she has deep expertise in this topic. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to her. Banu.
Okay, hi everyone. Just like Ryan mentioned, today we'll be talking about Microsoft Cloud App Security, and today's webinar will be focused around threat protection. So the first thing I want to talk about is our Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph. All of our threat protection products use the Intelligence Security Graph. We use these signals to analyze them and use them in our solutions to improve threat detection throughout our products. We have trillions of signals from various different places that give us the ability to improve our techniques and our overall detection. If you're familiar with our CASB products, obviously you know Microsoft Cloud App Security is a CASB. The first step is to discover which applications are being used in your network, gain visibility into shadow IT, get the risk assessment associated with these applications, try to understand how many users are hitting these apps, and get ongoing analytics. Once you decide which applications you'd like to onboard, you can control access in real time. So you can manage and limit access based on various conditions, such as the user, the identity, whether they're logging in from a managed or unmanaged device, and which location they're logging in from as well. The next thing is protecting your information, and that's what our last session was about. This is where you're able to protect how data is being transferred within various cloud applications and prevent data sharing and make sure your data is overall safe. And today's session is focusing around detecting threats. So we're going to talk about what we do to help you detect and remediate these threats. So Cloud App Security is able to detect malicious insiders, possible malware that's implanted in your storage applications, any compromised account, and data exfiltrations. So it uses behavior analytics to detect any unusual or suspicious activities that your users are doing. So there's about a month initial learning period, and after MCAS understands what the day-to-day activities of your users are, we're able to notify you if anything is suspicious or unusual. Okay, so how do we know if we have threat delivery or a compromised session? A lot of times we're overwhelmed with alerts and we have no idea what they mean. So these are the types of alerts you would see if you have a threat delivery and persistence. For example, you'll go into the alerts section of MCAS and you'll get notified if there's possible malware or a malicious auth application used, or even multiple failed logons to an application. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we are using behavior analytics. So anytime there's an indicator of a compromised session, anything your user is doing, any activity that's taking place that's suspicious, for example, a suspicious IP or anonymous IP, or an activity from a country they've never logged in from, are all indicators of a compromised session, and we make sure to notify you on this. Malicious use of an end user account. Some of the alerts you'll see any unusual file download or file deletion activity, ransomware activity, or even data exfiltration to an unsanctioned app. If you're seeing these type of alerts in your environment, there's a chance that there's a malicious use of an end user account. And again, if they're able to get access of a privileged user in your environment, some of the things you'll see, any impersonation activity, anything unusual that's for your admin to do, you'll get notified of this. And of course, if there's multiple VMs being deleted in your environment, you'll get notified of this as well. So these are the list of detections. You guys will have access to the deck, so you'll be able to go back and see which alert and which detection means what. So if you have ransomware, obviously that means ransomware. Unusual file share activities means there might be possible exfiltration of your data in your environment. Multiple failed logons mean there's a brute force. Unusual admin activities, again, privilege escalation. So this gives you an idea of which detection, which alert, what it means, and how you can better remediate it. Malware detection. So malware detection is not automatically enabled, but it is a detection that comes out of the box with MCAS. Once you go ahead and turn it on, it scans all your cloud storage applications and notifies you anytime that it finds a risky file, so you can further investigate and remediate it. And this is powered by the Microsoft Threat Intelligence as well. Okay, so OAuth app permissions. We have visibility into seeing which applications your users are giving access to using their corporate accounts. If you're not familiar with what an OAuth application is, these are the applications that are installed by your users in your org that request permissions to access user information and data during the sign-in process into cloud apps. And they're giving access to these applications using their corporate accounts. And when a user installs these apps, they often don't even read the guidelines or the terms and go ahead and accept it without reviewing the details. And then they automatically grant access to these applications. Well, with MCAS, you have the capability to actually ban and revoke access to these apps. And within the demo, we'll walk you through how that looks like. And this slide is an OAuth experience. So sometimes you'll get an email that a Google Doc has been shared with you. I'll say the Google Doc would like access to read, send, and delete and manage your email, manage your contacts, and your user might not even read that they're giving access without reading the terms and services. And this is the person's email, and this is how access is granted to an OAuth application. So are there any questions, Ryan, that you see that we can answer before we go into the demo?
Yeah, we've got a few here. Is malware detection for any apps or only for API connected apps?
Right now, it's for API connected apps.
Okay, great. Also, is using detonation to detect detect malware, or what's happening behind the scenes?
That's something that we recently added.
Okay. Is it using any other techniques, or is it just the detonation primarily?
I think Johan can add more details to this question.
Yes, thank you, Banu. So we do have two ways to actually detect malware. So number one, the historic way that we've been doing for a few months already, which is simply signature based. That's pretty straightforward, something that is very classic and still very efficient. But on top of that, to make sure that we don't miss anything, especially now that with viruses mutating, we did add detonation to make sure that we are able to detect proactively malwares that have not been classified.
Great, thanks for adding that, Johan. When you turn malware on, does it retroactively look at files that have been on OneDrive or SharePoint that have been put there in the past?
It's able to scan it after the API has been connected.
And then kind of a related one here, is that only on access, or is it always kind of continuously scanning for malware?
It's continuously scanning. So once you connect the API, whether that's OneDrive or let's just say any box, for example, will continuously scan for it. Okay, I think we can take one more question, then we can head to the demo.
I think that's actually all we had for right now, so you're
okay.
Fine to go ahead.
Okay, so this is the general MCAS dashboard, and I'm going to start off by looking at our policies. So first, we're going to talk about our built-in policies that protect you right out of the box. And these are our anomaly detection policies, as well as our malware detection policies. So for anomaly detection, some of the policies that are built in are impossible travel, activity from anonymous IP address, activity from infrequent country. And something we recently added was the ability to actually edit these anomaly detection policies. And what I mean by that is now you have the capability to actually scope them to a specific group. So an example for this use case would be is let's just say you have a group of users that are frequently traveling internationally for work. So when this alert gets triggered, most likely the case is it's a false positive. So if you go ahead and if you add all these users to a specific group, you can make sure to scope it and make sure these specific users are not part of this policy, and the alert won't get triggered on their behalf. In addition, this is something we'll have a session on. You can also send alerts to Flow, and this is our last session, and we'll walk into detail of how that works. So the first part of the alert is obviously triggering it, but if you wanted to take an automatic governance action, you can actually come into the alert and choose what you want to do in the case this alert gets triggered. Every API has a different governance action you can take. With Salesforce, for example, you can notify or suspend the user. However, with Office 365, you can only suspend the user. So another thing we recently added was the impossible travel alert. This is an alert we see when we see a user logging in from 2 different locations with not a reasonable time frame. So this is something you would see if you have a user logging in from both the US and let's just say Brazil within minutes apart. We know that's impossible, so this alert will get triggered. Again, you can also scope this alert to a specific user group. And now something else that we added is the sensitivity slider. So you can change how sensitive you want this alert to be and how often you want to be alerted on this specific alert as well. So again, this is giving you more capability and more control of how you want to see these alerts and the ability to reduce false positives. So the other alert that's built in is malware detection. And unlike the anomaly detection policies, out of the box, it comes disabled. So if you want to enable this, you would have to come here into the policies page and enable the policy. And once you're here, you can actually see what the matches are for malware detection. In our tenant, for example, we have 7 matches. And now this is something new that we've added. For the detection type, previously was threat intelligence. We recently added sandboxing, and that's going to be available in most tenants within the next month or so. So another policy that we can use is the activity policies. This gives us the capability to create custom threat detection policies and monitor the activities our users are doing. And with an activity policy, we have some built-in templates to get you started. So if one of your concerns is brute force in your environment, you can actually choose a template and create and choose a multiple failed user logon attempt to surface and have the visibility anytime a brute force is triggered. With these activity policies, you also are able to customize the repeated activity, whatever you seem appropriate for your organization. And after you go ahead and whether you use a template or customly created, you can actually choose to edit and preview the results as well. So if you decide to actually create this policy, these are the results that would pop up. You would see any failed logins, who the user is, the applications these logins are failing from, the IP address and the location this happened, as well as the device and the date. So this is giving you a lot of visibility into what's happening in your environment. And again, if you felt like you didn't want to use a template, you can also customize it yourself. So you can choose no template and name the policy whatever you'd like and choose a single or repeated activity. Say you can do, let's just say 10 activities and then make it, lower this down to even like something like 5 minutes. The filter gives you the ability to make this as custom as possible. You can choose the activity type, admin activity. If you want to scope this down to a specific application, you get that capability as well. Location, source, user, however you want to narrow this down and get alerted on, you have that capability. So let's just say for you, it's important to get notified anytime somebody's logging in from a risky country. So that could be an example. Any activity that takes place, let's just say from Nigeria to you, this is risky, you want to know any logons to all applications, so you're keeping this very broad, you have that visibility. And you can take an automatic governance action and suspend the user anytime they're logging in from Nigeria, because this is a high-risk session and you want to avoid this type of activity immediately. So we touched on OAuth applications, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So pretty much when we come on to the OAuth section of MCAS, we can see the three products they use to give access to. So Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce. And we can see which applications your users are actually using their corporate essentials to give access to, who the users are, what the permission level that's associated with it is, as well as you have the ability to mark this application as approved or ban it. The next thing you can do is, let's just say you want to filter this down further and just see only applications that have a high severity. So you can go ahead and click on high severity. And you'll be able to filter this down to all the applications that have high severity. If this is something that's really important to you and you want an alert triggered on this, you can actually create a policy from the search. You can name the policy high severity. High severity OAuth apps, and every time you have an OAuth app that gets discovered that has a high permission level, you'll get notified. And the next thing you can do actually with Office 365, anytime this alert takes place, you can revoke that application. Just something to remember is if you choose to revoke this application, it will revoke it for all users that have with high permission level apps, which is something to keep in mind. Okay, so Ryan, before I move on to the investigation piece of the threat detection, are there any questions?
Yeah, a few of them here. Do these have the same delays as the real-time 15 minutes and offline data as AD, or is there a different delay?
For the most part, they're pretty much real time.
Okay. Are there any risks to be considered when enabling the malware detection policy?
No.
Are they going to add a feature in the future to notify Office 365 users?
I'm not familiar with that. Maybe Johan, are you familiar with that feature getting added?
Would you mind repeating the question, please?
Sure. Are they going to add a feature to notify Office 365 users?
Actually, we do have a feature that is already similar to that. You could notify users on an alert using Microsoft Flow integration. So typical example would be, for example, if a user is suspiciously connecting from, let's say, Nigeria, you could say that you could ask him, did you actually go to Nigeria, and wait for the response before taking a governance action from MCAS.
And this is something we do have a session on. I think it's our last session, right, Ryan?
It's the last session indeed, and we'll have a full session about this integration. It really brings a lot of new features.
Okay, great. And then another one here, what's to stop a black hat from following along with this info that you are providing and build an attack around the default policies? Are these policies being adjusted or being updated as new info is learned to be applied?
The policy, you can answer it, Jan.
We do update, yeah, sure. We do update policies on a regular basis when there are new areas or new attack methods that needs to be taken care of. Now, there's never 100% reliable way to prevent a black hat hacker from bypassing a detection. That being said, they're pretty broad, and we have not seen yet any specific targeted attack against the policies in MCAS to bypass them. On the contrary, we have caught several customers that several customers have caught attacks that were successful and were able to stop the bleeding very quickly thanks to MCAS. Is it impossible? I'm not going to guarantee that, of course, as you can imagine.
Okay, great. Is there anything being done to speed up the performance of MCAS? I love the capabilities, but find myself often frustrated with the screen loading times.
Something we're constantly working on to improve performance.
Okay, great. Is it possible to detect compromised identity databases, for example, Pastebin, like Azure Identity Protection does, and flag or block a user that they find in that?
Databases. I'm personally not familiar with that capability, but I know we can see if there's a compromised credential right now. One thing I just want to mention is the MCAS portal will be joining with the Azure HCP portal. So it will be a unified SecOps experience where you are able to see any detections related to identity in one place.
Great. Another question here. We have a custom policy set up to look for protected information uploaded to Box outside of approved folders. It seems like we're limited to the number of folders we can exclude from the alert. Is this the case?
I'm not familiar with that, but if you can actually send us an email to our tech community, we can further investigate this.
Yeah, so that's where you would go to aka.ms/security community, and our MCAS group is there, and you can post it there with, say, some screenshots or details, and we can dive into that question further.
Yeah, and you can always submit a support ticket, and we can get that looked into as well.
Who's also wondering if excluding a top-level folder also excludes the child folders. You know that?
This is related to information protection when creating a Box policy.
It seems to be.
I'm not sure, Johan. Do you know the answer to that question?
I believe it does. Yes, indeed. If you actually choose a folder, you will be able to choose the parent folder, and the children folder will automatically be excluded as well, or included for that matter, depending on your policy.
Got a couple more here. Will MCAS be integrated with Sentinel at some point?
So it's not going to be, I don't know if there's any plans for that, but you should be, since the Sentinel is a SIM product, and MCAS, with MCAS, you can integrate your product system where you can send your alerts and your activities to a SIM product. You should be able to do the same thing with Sentinel. So that's the level of integration that's available.
Okay, great. We've got a question here about purchasing. Do I get MCAS with my O365 plan, or do I have to buy it separately?
MCAS, this version of MCAS comes standalone or with EMS E5.
Okay, great. Is there additional training or information on creating customized policies in the security alerts?
There's just whatever that's available in docs. But again, if you have specific questions or use cases, you can reach out to us in the tech community.
Okay, great. And I know we can RBAC to assign roles. This question asks, can we limit global admins from access and specify only security-focused admins?
I know we recently added a new role for RBAC, but again, I would create this as a support ticket for something we can look into for your tenant, or possibly put it in as a feature request.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we've got right now. Thank you, Bonnie.
Okay, no worries. All right, so this is our alert page. So here you're able to see what alerts have been triggered based on the built-in policies as well as the policies you've created. So you can filter this by your resolution status, the category, the severity, or the app, the username, and the policy. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the investigation process. So here we have a user named Bill George. And as you can see, there's multiple alerts that have been triggered for him. The first thing we see is a multiple failed logon attempts, which means that brute force was used to compromise this user's account. And the reason we know it's compromised is because there was activity from a Tor IP address that was successful. And there was also impossible travel activity taking place for 2 applications. So you can see the user logged in from Israel and Mexico, which means they probably logged in minutes apart. And they were able to access and compromise this account using brute force. The next alerts that we see is mass download as well as suspicious inbox forwarding. So what this means is this user was able to compromise this account and actually exfiltrate some data. So we can see Bill's account is clearly in trouble, and we need to investigate and see how this is happening and what's taking place. And we also see there was a ransomware activity that took place and was successful. So once we see what our alerts are, we can actually click on the alert and see why it was triggered. So in this case, we have the impossible travel alert, and we see that the user Bill George had login activities from remote locations. So we see that he logged in from Israel and Mexico within 68 minutes apart, which we know is impossible. Maybe his regular login is from Israel and Mexico is not where he usually logs in from, and we can see that because it says SharePoint was accessed for the first time from Mexico in 80 days, and this is why you're getting notified in this alert. So we provide you with all the evidence you need to see why this alert was triggered. Then we go into the activity log. So we can go ahead and investigate this alert in the activity log and see what the audit trail is. So we see the multiple failed logons. So we can actually click on this. And we see that Bill George is actually an administrator, an Office 365 admin, and that's why his account was pretty much went after, and he was the target of this, of these alerts. And here you can see similar alerts, activities of the same type, all user activities, activities from the same IP address, activities from the same country as region, as well as activities within the same time frame. So you have the visibility and the capability to pivot multiple ways to get more information and gather evidence to see if these alerts actually accurate. In this case, we see that Bill George had 6 open alerts from 2 different countries, 6 ISPs and 6 IP addresses. This alert was triggered about a month ago, but we do see there was a spike in the activities this user was taking place based on the behavior analytics of this product. We do see that visibility. So chances are this alert is accurate. Now, once we're in the alert, we can actually choose to take the action of how we want to remediate this alert. We can suspend the user from Office 365 or OneDrive or SharePoint, and that's the action we're choosing to take to remediate this alert. Now, if we actually go back to the alert after we decide how we want to solve for it, the next thing we would have to do is either dismiss this alert because we decide to suspend this user, or we choose to resolve this alert. And again, if we click on resolve, we just write how we resolve this, and we can see by suspending the user. And in addition, you guys can always send feedback about the alert if you believe there's something better we can do. So this is the typical investigation process. You pretty much go into your alerts page, click on the alert, see what the description of this alert is to understand why it was triggered, go look into the activity log, see what the IP address was, what were the activities, was there a spike in the user activity to give you an understanding of why the alert was triggered. This way you can go ahead and see if it was accurate and not a false positive, solve for the alert based on the options that are available, and then dismiss or resolve it. So this covers the portion of the demo. Are there any questions or anything specific that people want to see in the chat?
We had one question here around avoiding false positives. How can the users avoid false positives for the case where someone's going through VPNs or an online proxy in different countries?
So one thing you can do actually is come into the gear and add your corporate VPNs and IP addresses to reduce false positives. And once you add them, we'll know that they're logging from a corporate account. This way they won't get us triggered. And again, if you have somebody frequently traveling, you can scope those people in the infrequent country alert policy, sorry.
Okay, great. Is there any difference between dismissing an alert and resolving it?
When you're dismissing it, you're pretty much saying it's not important. When you're resolving it, you're saying that you actually resolved for this alert.
Okay, great. MCAS currently integrates with Defender ATP. Is it possible to block users from accessing unsanctioned apps if Defender ATP is deployed on their machines?
This is actually a roadmap item. It's something we announced on RSA that will be coming up. So it will be available. It's a roadmap item for us, and we just announced that at RSA this capability will be coming. It's not as of today. Right now, the Windows Defender ATP piece is strictly used for discovery, but the blocking will be something available soon.
Does MCAS leverage named locations in Azure AD or maintain its own list of IP ranges?
It does It does maintain its own list of IP addresses. This is something that you can see right here. You can see all the range names and the IP address and the source ISPs. And these are built into the product.
Okay, great. Does dismissing or resolving help the machine learning process?
I think Johan can better answer this question.
I'm sorry, I was reading another question. Would you mind repeating?
Yeah, no problem. Does dismissing or resolving alerts help the machine learning process?
No, not as of today.
Okay. Got a couple other here. Can this, I'm not sure which step they're referring to, but they said, can this step work with Flow? Can you talk a little bit about how you can use Flow?
Sure. So the idea with using Flow, again, we do have a session on this, is like Johan used in his example. If you have a user logging in from Nigeria, you would pretty much send them an email to confirm that they logged in from Nigeria. It's giving you that extra way to remediate your alerts automatically.
Okay, great. Is there any sandbox that users can experiment with?
I know some users do get a MCAS tenant environment, but one thing you can do is just go to demos.microsoft.com and get a test environment where you can do all your testing if it doesn't come with your licensing.
Okay, great. Then we've got another one on impossible travel here. How do we configure the alert for a user that authenticates to an application in 2 different countries, noting that the present alert doesn't take into account that the authentication fails in the second country, which is what we would hope would happen. Having a successful authentication from 2 locations implies an issue or breach.
Well, here's the thing. Sometimes with impossible travel, it could be a VPN thing that triggers the alert. Like, for example, if I'm constantly logging in from the US and then all of a sudden I'm traveling, I'm logging in, let's just say from Israel, it could be a VPN thing. It doesn't always hold true, but right now, the way it's built in, you just get notified on it. You can automatically suspend the user if it is successful in both locations.
Okay, great. Does dismissing the alert change the frequency of similar alerts in the future?
I think that goes back to the machine learning question, so the answer is no.
Okay. Does it support policies by autonomous system numbers rather than just IP addresses? Sometimes an O365 commandlet is executed in Microsoft data center in another country, and it looks like the user is there, but all their data centers are the same in terms of ASN. We would like to trust certain ASNs.
I'm not familiar with this capability. Johan, do you have any insight into this?
Neither am I. I would assume the response is no, because this is not something that I personally have experience with.
Yeah, neither have I.
That would be a great one. If you want to post some detail and some screenshots to our community, we can.
Exactly. We would be very happy to. It seems like an interesting discussion. We'd be happy to follow up if you're able to post more on the tech community.
Okay. Got another one here. I've seen some IP addresses that were improperly identified as being from a foreign country. How do we report those?
You can put a support ticket in for that. And again, if it's not, you can always write your own IP addresses, because sometimes when you create a custom tag, you can override the location. So I'll just show you guys that right now. So you can choose to override whatever location it's coming in from. If you can do it this way, or you can put a support ticket in for us, and this is something we can look into. And just so you know, you would do the support ticket by clicking this question mark and just clicking support.
Okay, great. Someone else is reporting, I have the same problem. Many accesses are performed by dynamic DNS and O365 IP addresses in the US and EU, and they get alerts from false positive. Okay, thank you for that feedback. It's good to know. Another question here, can you monitor multiple customers from a single pane when we are an MSP? Does it integrate, I assume I mean MSSP there, does it integrate with any RMMs to auto-create tickets for alerts?
So what you can do is a single account. So let's say you have your own Azure AD account, johnsmith@contoso.com. You can be granted access by all of your customers. You will still have different portals when you connect to them. If you want a single pane of glass, the best way, what I would usually suggest, is having some kind of a SIM that you would integrate with. And this way you would centralize all the alerts to one single entity, and you would be able to monitor that. And when you need more details, then you connect individually to each console that you need. The second part of your questions with regards to automatically creating tickets, you could actually do that again using the Microsoft Flow integration. There is the ability to there's a built-in connector between Flow and ServiceNow, for example, that would allow you to do that. If you're using something else but ServiceNow, it's on a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't be able to respond on the top of my head. But again, if you want to go a little deeper into that, we'll be happy to respond on the tech communities.
Since a user that is traveling then uses a VPN can inadvertently trigger a possible travel notice, wouldn't we want to suspend them? What would be a good way to work around that? Maybe
I think again, you can use the the Flow integration will be super helpful using that.
Okay, so like triggering an email to them automatically to then confirm.
Just to make sure where they are, and then once enabled, we can go ahead and decide how we want to solve for it.
Okay, great. Okay. Did you have more to cover, Banu, or were we just waiting for additional questions?
Just any questions. This portion of the product is pretty straightforward.
Okay, great. While we're giving another minute for additional questions here, I'm going to post some links for folks.
And one thing I just want to quickly mention, if you guys can still see my screen, I did add a resources slide where it links out to the documentation, everything I went over, as well as the RSA announcements that we recently had. So Ryan will attach this in the community so you can actually click on these and go over everything I went over today.
Great, thank you. I'm just posting links here to the webinar if for some reason you don't have the rest of the series, and then people are always asking about the recordings. We got a link to that here, aka.ms/MCAS recordings. It's also a good time to mention we've got some other interesting webinars for related products. For example, Azure Information Protection. It'd be great if you can join us there. And there's the link to that, aka.ms/AIP webinar. And then we've also, for our brand new Azure Sentinel product, our cloud native SIEM, we've got a link to that webinar as well here. That is aka.ms/Azure Sentinel webinar. Got a couple more questions here. Let's get to those. Can I stop MCAS from discovering all of my online SharePoint sites? I want every site collection to be scanned, but not finance sites. I heard that complete discovery kicks off once the SP app is connected to MCAS.
So discovery is specifically not around sites, it's discovering which applications are being used. So when you turn on the discovery piece of the product, it just discovers the applications that are hitting your network. It doesn't discover SharePoint sites.
Okay. And then this one says, sorry if we possibly covered this already, but can we expand the dictionary file size?
Again, this is related to the information protection piece of the product. So if you add this to the communities, this is something we can look into as an FR.
Okay. I'm going to post just a couple more links here. Our community that we were mentioning, it's a great place to answer questions, is at this link, which is aka.ms/security community. And the Q&A overflow for this call, if you're listening to this after the fact, or if we somehow missed your question here, is aka.ms/MCAS Q&A. Post that in here, one moment. There we go. We've got a question for how someone can get officially added to this meeting series. It's just a matter of that link that the aka-ms/MCAS webinar. And if you go there and register, then you'll be officially added. And for any future webinar series, we'll be announcing them on our community. Is Microsoft planning to unify/consolidate the various security solutions into a single portal?
Right now, the plans are just for Azure ATP and MCAS to become a unified SecOps portal.
And also Azure AD information protection at a later time. Azure AD identity protection, my mistake. But all three of these products will alert from the same portal, which is actually the portal that you're seeing here, the MCAS one. Of course, we'll have updates to it to accommodate for the different requirements of all those products.
Okay, we'll give just one moment here for any additional questions. I've got a question. Is tech community also a good place to get information and participate in open conversations? Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it's for. Is there any way to download the videos for offline viewing from streams? We will, by the end of this week, download and publish the files themselves. The links that we currently have published for the recordings just give you to a streaming recording, but I will also download the files themselves and post a link to them at the same location, the aka.ms/MCAS recordings. Okay, we've got another question here. I'm looking to align the user information captured via log discovery and then learn the API integrations. Is this achieved via user enrichment?
If I'm understanding this question correctly, pretty much using the user enrichment just makes sure that whatever is discovered in the discovery piece, it uses the same Azure Active Directory names. So that's what the user enrichment piece is. So if you're looking to make sure you have the same usernames in the discovery and within the activity log, that's where you would turn user enrichment for.
Okay, great. With that, I think that wraps up all of our questions. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thanks for being part of our community. We hope we will see you next week. And thank you, Banu, for a fascinating presentation.
Thank you.